Hey, everybody, it's Sean Hamel from the Art of Dental Marketing here with the first episode of season 2 of Origins, and super excited to have all the way from Australia at 6:30 a.m. Dr. David Moffet with us. Doctor, thank you so much for making it to recording the show, especially that early where you are.
Sean, it is early. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. And I jumped at this opportunity. It's the latest time you had, but I jumped at it.
Well, that means the world, and like I told you, next time just message me and be like, "Hey, it's 6:30 where I am. Let's work something out." But Doc, it's amazing to connect with you. I've seen you, I've heard your name. Social media is a big little place, of course, but I love what you're doing in terms of the ultimate patient experience. And with what we do here with the story based and emotive marketing that we do at ADM, patient experience is huge because it's your it's your market differentiator. I mean, that's what makes your practice different. It's not the dentistry per se. And I know you were a clinician for many years. And did this kind of develop as you were in practice yourself? Or tell me a little bit just of how you got on this journey to building this out.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's an interesting journey. I graduated a long time ago in 1982, and at the start of 1987, I bought my office. I'd worked as an associate for 4 years in in one location, and when I bought my office, I didn't really know what I was doing. It was just me, one staff member. That was it. And half the patients left because the guy I bought my office off went to work near his home and took all his friends with him. So I was just left with the ones who weren't his friends, which I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. So I built the office up, and what I did was I always looked at my time as being my best asset. And so, in the early '90s, when we were having down here what was called the recession we had to have, that was what our treasurer, national treasurer, said: "We're having a recession. We've all got to have it." And interest rates of 17.5% on your home and 28% on your business. My books weren't full, but people in
Mm-hmm.
the dental industry were telling me, "David, you're doing okay. You're doing double what the average dentist is doing." But I said, "Well, I still can do more." And then I met
Mm-hmm.
a dentist who was doing double what I was doing, and I thought, well, that shows me that there's potential. I've just got to find out what he's doing, because he's no better dentist than me. He worked in a lower socioeconomic group than me. And I said, if I can find out what he's doing and do that here, I can grow my business. And grow my business I did. And so that was 1997. By 2002, I'd tripled my business.
Wow.
And then by 2007, I doubled it again. And the principle was that I found a coach who told me that we're going to teach you how to love your patients to death. This is the way that you get people to come back, is build a relationship with them. And that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I was doing anyway, but not really that clever at it. And so with this coach, I grew my business. In 2007, I sold it, but stayed in it. And then I grew it another million while I was still working in it. And
It's awesome.
I was getting paid a commission more than the Australian Prime Minister was getting paid to run the country. It was ridiculous, but that's what I was doing. And so I started masterminding with a group of dentists in Chicago, and I'd meet every 3 months. I'd fly to Chicago and back for a weekend. And in 2010, what this guy used to do, he'd bring in, for the Saturday morning session, he'd bring in somebody outside of dentistry to talk. And he brought in a guy who was a customer service expert from Cleveland. And I listened to this guy and I go, this is what I'm missing. I'm missing the process. I know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it really randomly. And
Mm-hmm.
and the funny thing was, he'd flown from Cleveland to Chicago for this event. Then he was flying to Australia to speak, but he wasn't on my plane. He was on United. I was flying American and then Qantas. He was flying United. So I read his book on my flight, and I got back to Sydney and I said to my wife, I said, I've got to go and see this guy. But the day he was talking in Sydney, full day of patients. So I can't cancel those. But
Mm-hmm.
my day off that week, he was speaking in Brisbane. So I flew up to Brisbane. At the first break, I rang my wife. I said, we got to go to Cleveland and do this guy's 4-day course. So that was May, then that was July. We had to fly back to Cleveland to do this course. And that was the system that put it all together that then became the ultimate patient experience. We used his processes, did it in my practice, put all what we were doing together, enjoyed it with our team so much that I said, this is something we can teach other dentists how to do. And so I started, because I'd sold my office, and so I was only working as an associate, I had that freedom that at the end of my contract, I could do something different. So that's how I got into coaching. That's the short story, Sean, but that's how I got into coaching. 2012, I renewed my contract for another 2 years, but we had a new owner. The owner that I'd sold to had on-sold. I had difficulty working with that owner, and so I had the coaching. I'd started the coaching then, 2014. Went to work for a friend. Found out in 2017 I had arthritis in my hands, and I had a shoulder replacement. Had arthritis in my hands, and thought this is going to make life difficult, dropping things and just having to be more deliberate, because time again is doing. Nobody ever gets in the dental chair and says, "Doc, take as long as you want." In fact, if you
Right.
ask them, would you like me to do this in 1 hour or 2 hours? I'll go, just do it in one. They never even ask, will it be cheaper? They just want to get out of there. And so
Yep.
time in the chair for the patient is really, really important. But it also allows you to do more and see more patients. And that's, if you're a good clinician and you've got a good relationship, that's how you grow your dental business. So that's it. To 2017, hung up my drills. Been coaching full time through COVID. Haven't travelled as much because of COVID,
Mhm.
but we're out the other side of that, and so
Hopefully,
that's where I
fingers
am now.
crossed.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
Well, that's awesome. So did you always want to be a dentist? I mean, from childhood, what was kind of your moment where you were like, dentistry is what I'm going to do for the
Yeah,
rest of my life?
good question, because I was talking to Ed Zuckerberg about this,
Hmm.
and I asked him. When he went to dental school, was he the son of a dentist? He said, half the people in my year at NYU were the children of dentists. He said, but not me. And he married a doctor. He's got 4 kids, and of those 4 kids, none of them are in medical or dental. So he said,
Hmm.
and we had a joke, Ed and I. He said, back then, because he's about my age, a little bit older. He said, back then, he said, if you went to if you were smart at school, you were expected to do something medical, like dental or vet or doctor. He said, but now if you're smart at school, you're expected to do something with computers, and the dumb kids do dental. So, yeah. So I was like that.
Or marketing, or they get into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
marketing
yeah,
field too.
or internet, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was expected to be a doctor. I didn't get the marks to be a doctor, and I was going
Hmm.
to go back to school and do my leaving again. And my mum just said to me, with 2 days to go, she said, "I don't know why you put down dentistry if you didn't want to do it." I said, "All right, Mum, I'll give it a go." So after 2 years of dentistry, I actually qualified. My marks were so good to be a doctor, but I was sick of being a student. I just,
Hmm.
all the kids I went to school with, they weren't even smart enough. They were already plumbers and electricians, and they were making money, and I was making no money because I was doing 40 hours a week of study. And I said, I just want to get through this. I want to get my job, and I just want to get into this career, as you did back then. If one door shut, you just said, "All right, I've got to work." There was none of this. Oh, I need to rethink my purpose in life. And so
Hmm.
I fell into dentistry, and I just took to it. I just took to it. I was good with my hands. I was good with people. I'd learned how to. I worked in a bar for my last 2 years. 5 nights a week, I worked in a bar, so I knew how to get tips. I knew how to build relationships with people, and so that really helped me in dentistry. While my friends were there learning how to be better with their hands, I
Hmm.
was learning how to relate better with people.
And it's such an invaluable thing, and it's funny, there's so many people making money off of teaching those kind of intangible things. Of some people are just more naturally extroverted, some people are just more naturally good at relationship building, and people go to seminars and stuff trying to replicate that. And I don't necessarily know if it can be learned completely, but I think to a degree it can. But at what point do you feel like you really started to realize like dentistry isn't something where the relationship part can be absolved? Because I meet doctors that just want to do dentistry and go sit in the back, and it really doesn't work that way. It's a relationship and experiential business more than it's a features and benefits type business. Trying to show doctors, of course, people know that you're smart. You're a doctor. You don't have to tell them that. Of course, they know that you have advanced education. You're a doctor. You don't have to tell them that, right? Of course, they know that you work on teeth. You're a dentist. You don't have to tell them that. You need to talk to them about why you should be their dentist and how to get guide them on the outcome that they want to get to, what it is about your experience, because that's really what people are buying. That's why referrals work so well, right? We have that transference of trust and safety from one person to another, and that's what we do here. Is we're really good at getting that emotional kind of similar response across the marketing that works with word of mouth referrals and things so well for dentists, because you are coming from a fear basis and apprehension basis with a dental practice that you just don't get in other verticals. When I speak, I always joke it's like dental practices, skydiving school, tattoo shops. I mean, there's not a lot of things that people willingly buy that there's fear and apprehension. So the way that they approach the buying decision is different. And it's amazing to hear that, reading this book, and then you went to a seminar and kind of you were like, yeah, like this is kind of the secret sauce that's missing. And now the impact to see of what that's done for you and what you've turned it into. Why do you think maybe some dentists don't realize how relational this business is, maybe until they get out? And even once they're out of school, maybe it still takes a little bit of time for them to really see the need for crafting an amazing patient experience and like loving your customers to death, like you said.
Yeah, I don't know. I go to my dental school reunion every 5 years, and it's less and less people going and attending. So we're up to 40, 40 years, between 40 and 45 years. Is that right? No, it's 45. It's 45 to no, it's 40. It's 40 and 45 because my school year is 5 behind. Yeah, it's 40 and 45, and it's less and less. But the the people that I was still friends with at dental school, not many of those have been high achievers in dentistry, but they still are personable people. So there is a leap to being a one chair, one patient at a time dentist. I ran two chairs. I ran alternate chairs, and I ran a hygiene. I realized that you've got to get people coming back because that relationship is gold. And the people who come back love you, trust you, and believe you, and are there to see you, not there really to get their teeth checked. They're there to have that relationship. But
Totally.
while you were asking me that question, I thought of, I used to travel across town to get my hair cut where I first started working. And the hairdresser who I saw, he mentioned to me that he was selling his salon. And I thought, long way to go. I'll just find somebody else. So I asked one of my patients who was a hairdresser, and she also worked across town. She said, David, my family who live here see Sarkis. And I said, all right, I'll go and see Sarkis. So I go to see Sarkis, and it's a Thursday night in the salon. And he says, what do you got planned? It's a long weekend, day off weekend coming up. He said, what do you got planned for the weekend? I said, flying up to the Sunshine Coast tomorrow for the weekend. He says, what are you doing up there? Are you playing golf? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. And he said, I play golf. Well, Sarkis became my hairdresser for the next 10, 15 years. And now I live 2 hours out of Sydney. I don't see Sarkis, but there was a time I had to go up to Sydney for 4 weeks to do a house sit last year. And I couldn't, it was like, I just book every 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just like constant. It's in the diary. And I thought, I can't come back to this guy. So I said, I'll go and see Sarkis. And it was great. We're still good friends, social media wise. And it's about that relationship. Find that commonality and drill down on that commonality. You mentioned tattoo shops and skydiving. Those are still options that people want. They want the rush of skydiving. They want they want to have the tats. They forget the names of their family and their dogs and their mother, and so they want them there to remind them. But those are pleasurable things. Nobody wakes up on a Monday morning and looks in their wallet and goes, "Look, I've got $500. I'm going to go down the dentist and see what I can buy." You know,
Right.
it's a grudge buy.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do anything but go to the dentist, even though they know that they are prolonging um, treatment that is making them closer to a painful experience by prolonging it. They'll still do it if they can find an excuse. So it's really, you've got to get over that. And so the importance of a dental office is not that the dentist is the greatest person on earth and everybody else is just Oompa Loompas running around. It's got to be a whole team experience, and the dentist is
Totally.
just the icing on the cake. And if you can
Yeah.
build your practice like that, where they come to chat with your front office people, they're interested, and your team are interested in them, hygienists and dental assistants, and the dentist as well. Well, that's the gold.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared that about your hairdresser and how that commonality just kind of aligns you. And same thing with dentistry. And I say tattoo shops and skydiving school, just there's not a lot of things that people do have that just apprehension of not really, not really knowing what to expect. And usually, when you feature and benefit sell dentistry, it doesn't work because people aren't really in the mindset to hear that, let alone to know what you're going to do to them. But that commonality you're talking about, it pushes back against that negative emotion because commonality is safety for. That's just the way that we're wired as human beings. I always say that's why, in the movies, when the aliens show up, they send the helicopter up and they start shooting lights and stuff at them because they're trying to find that commonality to just eliminate threat, right? And little things like who you are, why you do what you do, your hobbies and interests, they're such powerful marketing messages and ways. And when I speak to rooms of doctors, I'm like, how many of you, like your favorite patients, you think about the people you just love to see? Is it a dentistry based relationship? No, we have things in common that have nothing to do with dentistry, right? It's so important, and it's amazing to see what it's done for you and also with all of your coaching clients and what you're doing. Because I think sometimes when at least in my experience, it almost sounds like, well, that's too easy, right? Like this has to be a more complex problem to solve, but it really is down to who you are, those little commonality triggers and things that just build comfort and safety for people, and what it can do for making all of your marketing and growth and patient experiences work better just with those little insights into who you are. It's incredible to see that work even in your situation with a hairdresser and the relationship that you forged. And now you guys have been lifelong friends. It's such an awesome testament to that entire process. And Doc, I was curious too, do you like consulting more than being a dentist? Like what fills your bucket?
Well, I do enjoy helping dentists realize that they can grow their practice because, um, one of the people that I've studied in marketing, Dan Kennedy, used to say that if he ever needed to start a business in a town, he'd just look at what everybody else is doing and then just do the opposite. And that again in in that in that business of dentistry, um, we treated our business as being a customer service business. So not only finding the commonality, but also, Sean, finding building a relationship that we were there at their service. We were there to make their experience better than it was last week, better next time than it was today. Always trying to improve and to wow our patients and have them say, you know, have you got notes somewhere about me? Because you just seem to be pulling these ideas off the top of the head. But we learnt these things about people. What were things that their family were doing? What were things that they were doing? How was work? How was their sport, their recreation? What about their plans for holidays or just aspirational plans? And keeping with them, what are the children up to? All that sort of stuff. So it was more than just open wide, drill for an hour, close, pay. It was. We used to have patients would turn up half an hour before their appointment to have a chat with the team. We had patients still there an hour after their appointment, still chatting with the team. I asked my wife to come and work in my office when our children were old enough to find their own way home from school because we needed a concierge. Now, who says a dentist has a concierge? She said, what do you want me to do? I said, you just come in and schmooze with people. They come
Mm-hmm.
in, they're nervous, And I want you to keep their level up, because if you can distract them from the nervousness, they're going to be more conducive to accepting treatment options than just do it quick or just get it over with or cheap as possible. And so she was the schmoozer, and she was really, really good at it. But sadly, one day she turned up and I said, got a little bit of a problem. She said, what is it? I said, both my receptionists are off sick. You're going to have to answer the phone. She goes, how hard can that be? Well, there's a process to answering the phone, because everybody who rings needs an appointment, but they'll do anything. They'll look for a buying signal or a negative signal that says, I'm not going to that office. And so she worked out that you need, like baking a cake, it's got to be an 8-step process that you can't, it's not snakes and ladders. You can't go from one to the other. You've got to start at 1 and get to 8. And she's now, she's Australia's greatest phone skill trainer, and helping teams just become familiar with that stuff. It's something that you can learn. You mentioned about learning customer service. Even that is something that you can learn. No, the beauty of the human is that no human has ever been born talking. No human has ever been born with a telephone in their hand, and no human has ever been born with a dental drill in their hand. These are things that people have to learn, right? And it's practice and learning at a young age. Tiger Woods is the classic, isn't it? It's like start at a young age and just drill those muscle memory. And all this is talking is muscle memory, brain is muscle memory, and drill that in. So anybody can do it. It's whether they want to do it or they aspire to do it in terms of building a relationship.
Love it. And Doc, I'm curious, and I mean, this is Origin, so I want you to give us just kind of the raw truth of your journey. What was it like internally when you were going through this process of, I want to grow the practice? What was it internally, maybe with this service approach? Because I do think sometimes doctors hear this kind of discussion, or they hear this patient experience things, and like having a dedicated schmoozer is amazing. But what was it internally within yourself that really pushed you out of your comfort zone to not only do this? And then the second part of that question, what maybe if a dentist is listening to this and they're not sure if this would work for them, what are some ways maybe they could work through that, or see if it's even something in their practice that they could implement with their existing team? Give me kind of an idea of what pushed you into the direction of really feeling this, and not only that, but developing the execution that you have to the level that you've been able to do all these amazing things teaching this. And then maybe just help dentists that are listening identify within their own selves, maybe this is the answer to what I'm trying to do to grow my practice.
Well, Sean, I think I used to go to dental meetings and I'd hear dentists say, I see 50 new patients a month. I see 100 new patients a month. And I'd go, how big's your practice? It's just me and, 1 or 2 staff. I said, what about your hygiene department? Oh, don't have any of that. So that means 50 or 100 are coming in each month and 50 or 100 are leaving each month. And I thought that's a really dumb use of resources. Why spend money attracting patients when you're just churning through them? And so that love your patients to death is so that you can keep them. Every patient wants to find a dentist. I just want to find a dentist who I can trust and I can build a relationship with. And in the 28 years I was in my office, some of those patients were there as patients of the guy I bought my practice from. And also my neighbor next door. I had a dentist in the rooms next door. When he decided to sell, he sold to me, came to work for me for a year, and then I merged those 2 offices, and it was his father's practice before that. So I had patients who'd been coming since World War II to what was one continuous office between me and him and his father. And that was always, let's not lose a patient. Certainly there's some patients that you want to get rid of. You can't be everything to everybody. You can't do all types of dentistry for everybody. You've got to pick your lane in what you like to do. We did good restorative dentistry. We were good at cosmetic dentistry, but it wasn't our lane. It was something that we did. But it saved people to have a 40-minute drive into the heart of Sydney to go to somebody who who specialized in that sort of stuff. I was pre-implant. I only placed less than 20 implants before I left my office, and no scanners back then either. So, the technology, but you had to learn how to build that relationship. And I think anybody can. The other thing that I did, Sean, was I avoided the noise. A lot of dentists get bogged down in how am I going compared to other dentists. And my wife will actually say this, and we use it as a joke. You know how your wife will say, "Well, how do I look? We're going out. How do I look?"
It's
And
a slippery slope.
well, the joke line is never to say this, but I say this because she knows I'm joking. I say, "You look really great. You know, you look better than most people your age." That's not what she wants to hear. But it's the same in dentistry. People say, "Oh, I'm doing better than most dentists." I actually ignored the noise of dentistry and I focused on the economics of dentistry with my business. So I learned that every time that every quarter the government announces the inflation rate, and if you don't put your prices up by the same as the inflation rate, you're actually giving yourself a pay cut. And some dentists go years without putting their prices up to keep up with the cost of bread, gas, rent, all that sort of stuff that they're paying in their own personal life. And yet employees in other industries, in unions, get wage rises, but why are we not? And yet our rents are going up, our wage bills are going up, our materials are going up. And so we're really cutting. So I kept adding, and this is at the time of 10%. For 6 years in a row, I just kept putting the prices up 10% every year. And so what happened was that my fellow dentists weren't. And I worked out that my prices were double what the average dentist was, and yet I was getting busier and busier because the public perceives sometimes that if your prices are higher, you're a better dentist, or your quality is going to be better, or I'm going to get a better experience. So it actually attracted a better quality of customer as well. And that was a byproduct of what I was doing. But it allowed me to feel comfortable with these incremental improvements in the price, because every time I put my price up 10%, I didn't lose 10% of my patients. That would be break even. I actually might have lost 1 or 2%, but there was always a financial benefit of keeping up. So following the economics of business as well was really, really important. Everything had to be, you had to consider the economics of business in terms of every choice you make.
And I love to hear you say that, because I think marketers tend to push doctors towards discounts and gimmicks. And I've developed kind of my own theories on why this happens, but I call it the cycle of mediocrity. But it's where
I
dentists kind of
love
get
it.
trapped in this cycle with marketing. And it starts with the fact that everything looks the same. Like every dental website looks the same. It's very clinical. The messaging's misguided. So, of course, it's not working. But because everything looks the same, there's no differentiation happening. And so the marketing companies tell them, do a new patient special, like discount your work, right? Even though they're not giving you a discount, but discount what you do to compete with each other for price and proximity battles, which isn't a great model, especially when you've got DSOs now that are doing $20 new patient specials. But I love to hear you say that, because I tell doctors all the time, you don't have to do a new patient special. There's a difference between doing one because you have to and doing one because you want to, if you even want to do one at all. But you don't have to do a new patient special. And on the cycle of mediocrity, like you had alluded to, there's no differentiation, which leads to, hey, we've got to discount each other out of the way so we can get the patients in, which leads to those undesirable patients, which kills your morale. It wears on the team, it wears on the doctor. The doctor hits a breaking point and they hire another marketing company. Most of the marketing companies that are out there are built to profit. They're not necessarily built to grow the dental practice. And so they may have a gimmick or a bot or some flashy thing that they're selling, but the core business itself is templated websites, generic messaging, all the stuff that doesn't work. So once the newness wears off and the system settles back, you have the same issue where the marketing company now starts over and they say, hey, doc, we know things are cooling off. Or the doctor says, hey, my phone's not ringing as much. Well, let's do a discount and give us more money to advertise so we can expand our reach and get more low hanging fruit for you so that we're doing a good job, right? And the cycle starts over and they just stay on this hamster wheel. That's why, dentists, I've talked to thousands, we work with hundreds. I've been able to kind of piece this together from listening to all of these stories. not to say that ADM is the greatest dental marketing agency ever. I think we do a really good job. I think there's others in the industry that do a really good job too. But this patient experience, thinking that way, like it's there's nothing wrong with charging people an appropriate fee for the experience that you give. And I totally agree. If it's like, hey, this might hurt, infection, whatever the worry is, and then you say to somebody, hey, I'll do it really cheap. I'll give you a big discount. It doesn't correlate for people where dentistry isn't really somewhere I want to skimp. There are people that are like that, but let the businesses that are built for those people have them and focus on, like you said, have pride in your work. There's nothing wrong with it. And there will always be people that will pay it, especially if you get the marketing message out of, hey, it's a great experience. We love you. Your practice professional schmoozer. Anybody listening to this podcast, get a professional schmoozer. Reach out to Dr. Moffet. He can help you with the job description, I'm sure. But I absolutely love that idea that you had a dedicated like patient concierge in-house just to love people. It's absolutely brilliant because that's what people flock to. And so I just huge props to you on that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And my last thing that I wanted to kind of cover, because you have such a diversified resume, and I try to keep these kind of short. With regard to coaching now, what is it that you really dial in? Because there's a lot of consultants out there, but you're the only one that I've ever heard talk like this in terms of what you could bring and what this could do for a practice. And what I love about what you do personally, doctor, is that this is like long-term yield. This is perpetuity. That patient loves you. They stay with you forever. And everybody that they're interacting with from, now and into the future, guess whose name is going to come up? Guess who's going to get mentioned, when somebody's, and you build this little army of people. Talk to me a little bit about what the coaching experience is like for you. How do you help implement this? Whatever you want to share about your private coaching.
Well, what I try to help my clients do is shortcut, Sean, the road from graduation to retirement, so that there's less distractions, less speed humps, and
Love it.
stay in the right lane. Stay on the green line, because everything else in business, there's a green line, which is the way to go. It's a proven method, and then there's the red line, which most people try and work things out themselves, and they actually think that the when they're on the red line, that it's staying beside the green line, but it's getting further and further away every day, every week, every year. And so it's harder to get across. But the important thing is with looking at how do we deal with people, and how can we make our interactions with our patients benefit them and also benefit us. So simple things that I learned, call your patients who have had a difficult procedure, or an extraction, or they've had a crown issued, or a root canal to get them out of pain. Call them to see the next day to see how they are. Now, some offices are doing this, but the person who calls isn't the person who worked on them. So I started doing it myself. People say, "Oh, the doctor's got to do it." I started doing it myself. Patients would say, "Hey, doc, why are you ringing me all of a sudden? Did you do something wrong?" I go, "Well, that's not the response I want. So let me dial it back. Let's get the dental assistant who worked in my room with that patient," because I worked in 2 rooms. So get them to ring their TLC patients. And if they can't because they're busy the next day, get the receptionist, because we had 2 receptionists, the receptionist that check the patient out as well. And so if both of those were off, then we pushed it back another day. The other thing about calling, doctors should call at the end of the day. What's the point of that? Patients at home, cooking dinner, eating dinner, unwinding. We'd call the next day, call them at work. They get off the phone, they go, "You wouldn't believe, that was my dental office just checking that I'm feeling okay." And you know what everybody else at work says? "My dentist doesn't do that. Who's your
Yeah.
dentist?" So it's looking for these opportunities all the time.
And I love how thorough you are with it, even down to the person that checked them out. Like clearly the juice is worth the squeeze. Like this extra effort is worth it. The proof's in the pudding. Your practice exponentially grew. But it's amazing the level of detail that you put into this, and the systems that you built, and then now what you teach other offices. Last question I have for you, Doc. How can you get your team on board? Like if you're a dentist and you want to do this stuff and you're like, I don't think my team would ever do it. How can you get your team on board with these concepts?
It's it's an interesting, because that was my hurdle when I first took on that coach, and it was actually my second coach. My first coach was a disaster. So, but like dating girls, the first one's a disaster. The second one might be your wife. I figured I'd got to find another coach, and so with that second coach, I said, he said at this opportunity meeting, he said, we can go into a practice and find somebody who's costing that practice $200,000 a year. This is in 1996. And I'm sitting there with my mate, and I said, that's my practice. I've got someone in my practice who, at my reception desk, people were walking out of the treatment room and saying, thanks, doc, that was great. And they're not rescheduling. And I'm going, where's the problem? And it was her. And he said, we'll find her, and if we'll train her, and if she doesn't train, then we'll have to replace her. And that's exactly what happened. She was not coachable, and she left. But I landed on my feet, because the replacement receptionist at that time, one receptionist and one dental assistant back then, the replacement receptionist was just exactly what I needed, a people person. And in fact, where she had previously worked, he was a friend of mine. He kept saying, you are so lucky to have her. He said, I'd love to have her back. And she stayed with me for, I think, 3 or 4 years, and then left to have a baby, and then came back and stayed with me again for another 3 or 4 years before she went home to work in New Zealand. And she was the answer. So sometimes it is that some people won't change, but other team members say, I like this. And if a doc thinks his team won't do it, sometimes the team actually want to do this sort of stuff, but the doc has never suggested it. And so it's a breath of fresh air when the doc says, hey, what do you think about this? So, but you do get people who come and they say, how can you teach me how to answer the phone? I've been answering the phone for 20 years. And we'll listen to their recordings, and they don't even find out who they're talking to for 8 or 9 minutes until they're making an appointment. And then you wouldn't do this at a barbecue or at a cocktail party. You wouldn't say last name, first name, date of birth when you're introducing yourself to somebody or find out who they are. But that's what they're doing on the phone. Find out who you are. Hi, Jenny. When was the last time you saw Dr. Moffet? Oh, I've not been there before. Oh, well, welcome. You're in the right place. Just get that language happening.
Amazing advice, and I'm clicking through memories of listening to calls and things, and you're so right of how the average call goes. And it's I think I want to thank you again for doing this podcast. I hope we can do many more. I've really enjoyed learning more about you and hearing about these amazing patient experiences that you've been able to cultivate. And I have conversations a lot, doctor, with dentists that spend many, many thousands of dollars. So it's like with dental marketing, in my experience, you kind of have the sliding scale. Like on one end, you've got the really cheap stuff, obviously, super generic, set it and forget it. And then you have these really expensive branding agencies that exist. And, the doctor says, oh, this brand, it's me. Like, this is me, finally. And they spend all this money, but then they still call and they're like, hey, this isn't working. Because pretty websites are great, but they don't sell things, right? Pretty logos are amazing, but they don't sell things. And so one thing, there's so much in this episode, but for the doctors listening, it's okay if you spent the money on a really expensive website, a really expensive brand. This is how you really grow your practice, though, in a long-term way. These are the concepts that you can implement, whether you have a really cheap website that you did yourself or a website that you spend a bunch of money on. It doesn't change the meat of what Dr. Moffet is doing and has done and what we're talking about today. That's really how you move the needle. You don't always have to spend your way out of marketing problems. Sometimes you just kind of go internal and look at this patient experience, look at how you're making people feel. Hire a schmoozer. Get a schmoozer. That's going to be the title out of this episode, Doc, is get a schmoozer to come in and just love on your patients. But Dr. Moffet, how can listeners get in touch with you? How can they learn more about your services? How can they find out where you're speaking? Hit us with all that stuff.
Well, I'm on all the socials, Sean, and what you see is what you get. I don't have if you look me up on Facebook, you can see everything that I do. It's public. It's not just cover photos and face photos only. I'm real. So it's David Moffet as as it's spelled, Moffet, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm still trying to work out. You can go to my website, theultimatepatientexperience.com, and you can connect with me that way. Or if you're old-fashioned and you just want to email me, it's David at the THEUPE, 6 letters, because that's a lot easier to type than the ultimate patient experience the first time. David at theupe.com. Tell me that you saw me on Sean's podcast, and I'll be straight back to you.
Hey, Doc, thank you so much for doing this. I honestly hope that we have many more of these. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I'll put all of Dr. Moffet's contact information in the show description as well. You can all reach out to me as well if you, for some reason, can't get a hold of him or have any questions for him, and I will get you connected with him. Dr. Moffet, thank you so much for doing Origins with me.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean. I appreciate it. Really had fun.
Take care, Doc.